Look, I need to tell you something right now, and you are probably not going to believe a single word of it. But I swear on every moon orbiting my home planet of Vexlar Prime that what I am about to share actually happened. My name is Quillix, and I serve as the communications officer aboard the Galactic Trade Consortium vessel, the Meridian Bloom. 17 cycles ago, I thought I had seen everything the galaxy had to offer: supernova births, black hole feeding frenzies, even a Zoltarian mating dance, which, trust me, you do not want to witness unless you have a very strong stomach and absolutely no sense of personal boundaries. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day I met Captain Marcus Webb of the human exploration ship, the Tsunami Rider. The humans. Oh, where do I even start with the humans? They had been part of the galactic community for maybe, 30 standard cycles? Barely enough time to learn proper docking protocols, let alone understand the fundamental rules of survival that every species with half a brain follows religiously. They showed up with their weird bipedal bodies, their strange obsession with a beverage they call coffee, which smells like burnt sorrow and tastes worse, and this absolutely baffling tendency to do things that would make a Krillian suicide monk say, "Hold on now, maybe think this through." So there we were, stationed at the edge of the Aquilux sector, a region of space that made even the most experienced navigators break out in whatever their species' equivalent of a cold sweat was. The sector got its name from an anomaly that defied every law of physics we thought we understood. Space here was not just space. It moved. It flowed. It had currents, eddies, and tides like an actual ocean, except this ocean could rip your ship apart at the molecular level if you looked at it wrong. 3 massive celestial bodies, each one a gas giant with rings that glowed like neon advertisements, orbited each other in a gravitational dance so complex that our best computers needed 6 hours just to calculate a safe passage through the outer regions. And at the center of this cosmic nightmare, the Maelstrom, capital M. Always capital M. You did not get to use lowercase letters for something that had personally destroyed 47 ships in the last decade alone. The Maelstrom was a spatial whirlpool roughly the size of a small moon. It spun, it churned, it sucked in anything that got too close and spat out debris, if you were lucky. Most ships just vanished entirely, consumed by forces that made our scientists weep into their datapads. The gravitational shear alone should have been impossible. The tidal forces should not exist in vacuum. The way space-time itself seemed to spiral inward, creating visible distortions that looked like water going down a drain, that broke at least 9 fundamental laws that every physics student learned on their first day. We maintained our position at a very safe, very sensible distance of 40,000 kilometers from the outer edge of the affected zone. Our mission was simple: monitor the Maelstrom, collect data, try to understand what fresh hell was happening here, and above all, do not get close. My captain, a Vexlarian named Cortax, was possibly the most cautious being I had ever met. He checked everything 3 times. He ran simulations before running simulations. He once spent 2 full cycles debating whether to adjust our orbit by 0.03 degrees. The man was so careful that other Vexlarians, a species literally known for our methodical nature, thought he was excessive. So you can probably guess his reaction when the human ship appeared on our sensors. I was at my station, monitoring the usual bands of chatter from nearby vessels, most of it complaints about shipping delays and the cost of fuel, when my console lit up like a festival display. A new signature coming in fast, way too fast, from the direction of the inner trade routes. I tapped my comm badge. Captain Cortax. Sir, we have an incoming vessel. Signature reads as human. Small craft, maybe frigate class, and they are moving at speeds that are, significantly above recommended levels for this sector. Cortax's voice came back, patient and measured as always. How significantly above Quillix? I checked my readouts again. Rechecked them. Checked them a 3rd time because surely I was reading this wrong. Sir, they are traveling at what appears to be 70% of maximum engine capacity, through the outer currents. Silence. Then Quillix. Did you just say they are flying at 70% power through gravitational currents that can tear apart starship hulls? Yes, sir. That is exactly what I said. They will be here in approximately 12 minutes at their current velocity. More silence. I could picture Cortax doing his thing where he touched all 6 of his finger tendrils together and breathed slowly through his gills. Hail them. Immediately. Inform them they need to reduce speed and adjust their trajectory to the recommended safe corridor, or they will not survive the approach. I opened a channel. Unidentified human vessel. This is the Meridian Bloom of the Galactic Trade Consortium. You are currently on a dangerous trajectory through unstable spatial currents. Please reduce your velocity and adjust to the following coordinates for safe passage. I transmitted the proper route, the one that took 6 hours, but kept all your atoms in the right places. The response came back almost instantly, and the voice was male, relaxed, with an accent I had learned to identify as something humans called Australian, which apparently was a region on their planet where everything tried to kill you, so that should have been my first warning. G'day, Meridian Bloom. This is Captain Marcus Webb of the Tsunami Rider. Appreciate the concern, mate, but we have got a schedule to keep. These little ripples are nothing compared to what we are here to study. Little ripples. He called the gravitational currents that had destroyed 3 ships in the last cycle little ripples. Orthax appeared at my station, all 4 of his eyes wide with what I recognized as profound concern mixed with disbelief. Did he just call them little ripples? Yes, sir. He absolutely did. Ask him what he means by what they are here to study. Please tell me they are not here for the Maelstrom. I asked. Oh, how I asked. The response made my translator unit stutter. The Maelstrom. Of course we are here for the Maelstrom. That is the whole point, mate. Earth Maritime Studies wants detailed scans of the spatial dynamics, gravitational harmonics, the work. Figure if we can understand how this beauty operates, we might learn something useful about similar phenomena elsewhere. Cortax made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a dying wheeze. They want to study it. They want to study the thing that has killed dozens of ships and crews. They want to study the most dangerous spatial anomaly in 3 sectors. It appears so, sir. Quilix. Inform them that the Maelstrom is absolutely off-limits. No one goes near it. This is not a suggestion. This is Galactic Maritime Law, Section 47, Subsection 9. The area within 10,000 kilometers of the Maelstrom's outer edge is a complete no-go zone. I relayed the information, pulling up the actual legal codes and transmitting them. Surely, the humans would understand. They had laws. They had regulations. They were a civilized species that had joined the galactic community and agreed to follow its rules. Right? Captain Webb's response was,
Well, it was very human.
Ah, yeah, see, we checked those regulations. Very thorough, by the way, you lot do love your paperwork. But there is an exception clause in Section 47, Subsection 12. Scientific research vessels with proper authorization can request temporary access to restricted zones for data collection purposes. Cortax's face went through several colors I had never seen it turn before. Do they have proper authorization? I pulled up their ship registration. Their vessel is registered as a research ship, sir, and they are transmitting an authorization code from the Human Research Council, countersigned by 3 members of the Galactic Scientific Directorate. Someone approved this madness? It appears multiple someones did, sir. The Tsunami Rider was close enough now that our visual sensors could get a clear image. The ship was not large, maybe 50 meters from bow to stern, but it had a look to it that was distinctly human. Where most species designed vessels with smooth, efficient lines and carefully calculated aerodynamics, even though we spent most of our time in vacuum where such things did not matter. Humans built things that looked like they were ready for a fight. This ship had angles. It had protrusions. It had what appeared to be reinforced plating along the hull, scarred and dented from previous encounters with who knows what. The name Tsunami Rider was painted in bright blue letters along the side, with a small image of what I later learned was called a wave, a moving wall of water from Earth's oceans. They coasted into a parallel orbit with us, exactly 400 kilometers away, and the precision of the maneuver would have been impressive if I was not too busy being terrified about what they planned to do next. Cortax activated the main view screen, and we got our first look at Captain Marcus Webb. He was tall by human standards, maybe 1.9 meters, with dark skin and hair that was cut very short. He wore a uniform that was part military, part something more casual, and he had this expression on his face that I came to recognize as the default human setting. Slightly amused by everything, as if the entire universe was one big joke, and he was in on the punchline. Captain Cortax, pleasure to meet you. Marcus Webb, Tsunami Rider. Sorry if we gave you a bit of a fright with our approach. We have done some modifications to the old girl here, makes her pretty good at handling rough conditions. Cortax pulled himself together with visible effort. Captain Webb, while I acknowledge your authorization, I must strongly advise against any close approach to the Maelstrom. The phenomenon is extraordinarily dangerous and poorly understood. Ships far larger and better equipped than yours have been lost. Webb smiled. Actually smiled. That is why we are here, Captain. To understand it better. Look, I know this seems barmy to you lot. But humans, we have a bit of history with dangerous water, oceans, rivers, storms. We learned to sail wooden boats on seas that could swallow islands. We learned to predict hurricanes, ride out typhoons, navigate around waterfalls that could pulverize stone. This, he gestured at the view screen, which showed the swirling horror of the Maelstrom in the distance. This is the same thing, just on a bigger scale. A bigger scale. Cortax repeated flatly. Captain Webb, the Maelstrom generates gravitational shear forces that exceed 300 standard Gs at the outer edge. The spatial distortion field extends for thousands of kilometers. Ships that enter the affected zone lose structural integrity within minutes. Minutes, you say? Well, that is plenty of time, mate. Our plan is to approach within 5,000 kilometers, deploy sensor buoys, collect comprehensive data on the gravitational harmonics and spatial flow patterns, and get out. Should take us maybe an hour, give or take. An hour. He wanted to spend an hour dancing with the thing that ate starships for breakfast. Cortax tried again. Captain, perhaps you do not fully comprehend the danger. The Maelstrom is not simply a strong gravitational field. Space itself behaves in ways that violate known physics. We have documented instances of temporal distortion, dimensional phasing, and energy patterns that should not exist. Right, which is why we want to study it. See, humans, we are pretty good at figuring out things that should not exist. We have this saying back home, if it is real, it can be understood. And if it can be understood, it can be navigated. Webb leaned forward. Tell me, Captain, has anyone ever tried approaching the Maelstrom intentionally, with proper preparation and equipment? No, Cortax said immediately. Because we are not insane. Or maybe, Webb countered, because you have not had species like humans around until recently. Species that spent thousands of years sailing into storms, testing limits, figuring out how to survive things that looked impossible. My ship is named after a tsunami. Captain, do you know what that is? I did, actually, because I had spent some time studying human culture after they joined the community. A tsunami was a massive wave, sometimes 20 or 30 meters tall, created by underwater earthquakes. They could destroy entire cities. They were death on a scale that made my scales itch. A destructive oceanic phenomenon, Cortax said carefully. Exactly, and we learned to predict them, track them, build warning systems, and design structures that could survive them. Because that is what humans do, Captain. We look at the thing that wants to kill us, and we figure out how not to die. Sometimes we even figure out how to ride it. There was something in his voice, a confidence that bordered on arrogance but was backed by something else. Experience. Maybe. Or just that uniquely human quality that made them think danger was a suggestion rather than a warning. Cortax looked at me and I could see he was running through options. Legally, we could not stop them. They had authorization. Morally, we should try to talk them out of it. Practically, I was starting to suspect that talking humans out of dangerous ideas was like trying to convince a black hole to stop eating things. If you insist on proceeding, Cortax said slowly, we will maintain our position and monitor your approach. We can provide real-time data on spatial distortions and gravitational fluctuations. That would be brilliant, mate. Appreciate the backup. Webb glanced at something off-screen. We will begin our approach in 30 minutes. Need to run some final system checks and get the crew prepped. Captain Webb, I spoke up, surprising myself. How many crew members are aboard your vessel? Just 4 of us. Small ship, small crew. Got my pilot, engineer, and science officer. Everyone knows their job. Everyone is volunteered for this. We are professionals, not thrill seekers. He paused. Well, we are professionals who also happen to find this sort of thing incredibly exciting. But you get the idea. 4 humans. 4 individuals who looked at the Maelstrom and thought, yes, that seems like a reasonable thing to investigate up close. The next 30 minutes were among the longest of my life. I watched the tsunami rider on our sensors as they ran their checks. Their systems showed readings that were unusual but stable. The ship's power output was higher than standard, their shield generators operating at configurations I had not seen before, layered and pulsed in rhythmic patterns. Their engineer, a woman named Kira Volkov, came on the comm briefly to coordinate with our sensor technicians. She spoke quickly, rattling off technical specifications and requesting specific data feeds. Her expertise was obvious. These were not amateurs playing at science, they were skilled professionals who had just decided to be skilled professionals doing something absolutely bonkers. The science officer, a man named James Okafor, transmitted his research protocols. His methodology was sound. His equipment was top tier. The list of measurements he planned to take was comprehensive and well thought out. If they were planning to study a stable nebula or a normal stellar phenomenon, I would have been impressed by the thoroughness. But they were not planning to study something safe. The pilot, and this detail struck me as particularly human, was named Yuki Tanaka, and her file listed her previous experience as Extreme Environment Navigation Specialist. When I looked up what that meant, I found records of her flying through ion storms, navigating asteroid fields at velocities that made my stomach turn, and once, apparently, threading her ship through the gap between two colliding moons with less than 50 meters of clearance on either side. Of course they had brought someone like that. Captain Webb appeared on the comm again, and behind him I could see his bridge. It was surprisingly calm. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, checking systems, strapping into stations with restraints that looked far more robust than standard safety harnesses. Meridian Bloom. We are ready to begin our approach. Transmitting our planned trajectory now. The path appeared on our screens, and I felt several of my organs try to relocate themselves. They were not going to circle around carefully. They were not going to probe cautiously from maximum safe distance. No, their trajectory showed them cutting directly across the outer currents, using the momentum to slingshot closer, then riding the gravitational streams like, "They are going to surf it," I said out loud. "They are going to surf the spatial currents." Cortax stared at me. "That is not a real navigation technique. It is for humans, apparently." Webb overheard through the open channel. "Your man is exactly right, Captain. We studied your data on the current patterns. They flow in predictable cycles. And if you time it right, you can ride the streams inward, use the countercurrents to brake, and position yourself in the relatively stable zones between flows. It is all about timing and momentum." "That is insane," Cortax said. "That is sailing," Webb corrected, "and humans have been doing it for 3,000 years. Just because your species never figured it out does not mean it cannot be done." And with that casual dismissal of everything we thought we knew about safe navigation, the tsunami rider's engines flared bright blue, and they began their approach. "I am going to need you to understand something about what happened next. I am going to describe it, and you are going to think I am exaggerating or making things up for dramatic effect. I am not. Every sensor reading, every visual record, every mathematical model we ran later confirmed exactly what I saw. The humans flew into the Maelstrom's outer currents like they were built for it. Yuki Tanaka flew that ship with a precision that bordered on prescient. The first gravitational stream hit them hard enough that our sensors registered a 6G acceleration spike. The tsunami rider's hull plating groaned audibly over the comm channel. Any normal ship would have tumbled, lost attitude control, been ripped into scrap. The tsunami rider banked, actually banked, like a bird adjusting its wings in the wind, and slipped into the flow. "Riding current Alpha 1, Tanaka's voice came through, calm and focused, compensating for drift. Adjusting pitch 3 degrees. They shot forward, accelerating along the gravitational stream, and I watched their velocity climb to numbers that should have been impossible in this environment. But they were not fighting it, they were using it. Letting the current carry them, making tiny adjustments to stay in the center of the flow. "Beautiful," Webb's voice said. "Absolutely beautiful. James, you getting these readings?" "Recording everything, Captain. The harmonics are even more complex up close. This is incredible." They approached the boundary between the first current and the second, where space itself seemed to ripple and distort. This was the point where two ships had broken apart 4 cycles ago, torn by the sheer forces. "Transition point in 15 seconds, Tanaka announced. "Prepare for lateral thrust." "Ready," Volkov's voice answered. I held my breath. Probably unnecessary since I breathe through different organs, but it felt appropriate. The tsunami rider hit the transition zone and space bent around it like water around a rock. Their shields flared, visible even from our distance, pulsing in rapid patterns. The ship twisted, engines firing in controlled bursts, and they slipped through the distortion like a needle through fabric. Current Beta 2 engaged, Tanaka said. We are in the pipe. They were now less than 8,000 kilometers from the Maelstrom's visible edge, closer than any ship had intentionally gotten in recorded history. The gravitational forces should have been crushing them. The tidal effects should have torn their ship to pieces. Instead, they deployed their sensor buoys. Small packages shot out from the tsunami rider, spreading in a careful pattern. Each one was a sophisticated sensor platform, transmitting data back to the ship in real time. James Okafor's excited voice filled the channel as information poured in. Confirmed temporal distortion gradient. Space-time curvature exceeding 0.95. Energy readings in the exotic matter range. Captain, this is beyond our best models. This is revolutionary. And then it happened. The thing that made everything that came before look like a casual practice run. The thing that made me realize we had not seen anything yet. The Maelstrom changed. The Maelstrom changed. Now, when I say it changed, I do not mean it shifted slightly or adjusted its rotation speed by a few decimal points. I mean the entire spatial anomaly. This thing the size of a small moon, this cosmic blender that had been spinning in exactly the same pattern for the last 800 cycles according to our records, suddenly decided to wake up and do something completely different. The outer edge, which had been a relatively stable boundary between normal space and absolute chaos, began to pulse. Not like a regular rhythm, but like a heartbeat that had just started sprinting. The gravitational streams that Tanaka had so expertly navigated, the ones that supposedly followed predictable patterns, started weaving and crossing like someone was playing jump rope with the fabric of reality. And the tsunami rider was right in the middle of it. Captain Cortax, I said, my voice probably 3 octaves higher than normal. Sir, the Maelstrom is exhibiting behavior we have never documented before. Cortax was already at my station, all 4 eyes locked on the sensor displays. Contact them immediately. They need to abort and exit the zone now. I opened the channel. Tsunami Rider, this is Meridian Bloom. The Maelstrom is showing unprecedented activity changes. You need to evacuate immediately. There was a pause, and I could hear alarms blaring in the background of their ship. Then Webb's voice came through, and he still sounded absurdly calm. Yeah, mate, we noticed. Things got a bit lively all of a sudden. Yuki, how are we looking for an exit trajectory? Working on it, Captain, Tanaka replied. The current patterns are shifting faster than my models can recalculate. Every escape route I plot closes before we can use it. Not ideal, Webb said, which struck me as possibly the greatest understatement in the history of sentient communication. James, any idea what triggered this? Okafor's voice was tense but analytical. Best guess? Our sensor buoys. We have been pumping out active scans, and I think the Maelstrom is responding to the energy signatures. It is almost like it is aware of us. Aware? Volkov cut in. You are saying this thing is conscious? Not conscious exactly, but reactive, like a whirlpool responding to an object falling into it, except on a scale that involves fundamental forces of space-time. The tsunami rider lurched suddenly, and I watched their position shift by 200 kilometers in 3 seconds. The gravitational stream they had been riding split into 3 separate flows, each one pulling in different directions. Hull stress at 60%, Volkov announced. Shields are compensating, but we cannot take much more of this. Tanaka's hands were apparently flying across her controls, because I could hear the rapid tapping in the background, trying to match the oscillation pattern. If I can sync our movement with the pulse frequency, we might be able to reduce the strain. How long until you crack that? Webb asked. At the rate things are changing? Maybe never. Maybe 10 seconds. Let me focus. I looked at Cortax. Sir, we have to do something. Like what, Quillix? Send a rescue ship. By the time anyone got close, the conditions would be completely different. We cannot predict what the Maelstrom will do from one moment to the next. He was right, and I hated it. We were watching 4 beings, insane and brilliant in equal measure, about to be torn apart by forces that made a mockery of physics, and there was absolutely nothing we could do except watch. The tsunami rider spun, not out of control exactly, but in a maneuver that looked equal parts desperation and calculated risk. Tanaka was rotating the ship to distribute the tidal forces more evenly, using the rotation to create artificial stability in the chaos. That actually might work, one of our navigation specialists said quietly. She is treating the ship like a gyroscope. Will it work? Vortax asked. For about 90 seconds, then the rotational stress will tear the ship apart anyway. Webb must have heard similar news from his engineer. Kira, give me options. Can we punch through with a full burn? Negative, Captain. The energy output would destabilize our shields, and we would lose hull integrity before we cleared the current field. We need a different approach. James, anything from your data that might help? Okafor was silent for a moment, and I could imagine him scrolling through readings at impossible speeds, his mind racing. Maybe. The Maelstrom is not just pulling everything inward. There are vortices within vortices, smaller circulation patterns inside the main structure. Some of them have exit vectors. Windows where the outward flow briefly exceeds the inward pull. Where is the nearest one? 2,000 kilometers spinward, but it only exists for 0.7 seconds every 11-second cycle. 0.7 seconds, Tanaka repeated. That is tight. That is impossible, Vortax muttered. For you, maybe, Webb said, and I swear I could hear him grinning. Yuki, can you thread that needle? Captain, if I miss by even half a second, we hit the sheer wall between currents. Best case, we lose shields and engines. Worst case, we get compressed into a cube roughly the size of your fist. Right. So do not miss. James, feed her your timing data. Kira, prepare for full emergency power to engines and shields simultaneously. We get one shot at this. One shot. Volkov confirmed. Routing all non-essential power to propulsion. Life support is going to minimum. Hope nobody needs to breathe much for the next minute. I watched their trajectory calculations appear on our screens. They were going to fly deeper into the Maelstrom first, using one of the stronger currents to build velocity, then cut across 3 separate gravitational streams, time their arrival at the vortex exit point to within a fraction of a second, and shoot through a gap that existed for less time than it took me to blink. They are going to die, someone on our bridge said. Probably. Almost certainly. The mathematical probability of successfully executing what they were attempting was somewhere in the range of 0.003%. I had run the numbers 3 times. But humans, I was learning, had a very complicated relationship with probability. Beginning approach vector now, Tanaka said. Her voice had changed, dropped into a tone of absolute focus. This was not the casual professional anymore. This was someone who had done impossible things before and was about to try again. All hands, secure for maximum acceleration. The tsunami rider's engines flared white-hot, pushing far beyond their rated capacity. The ship shot forward, diving deeper into the Maelstrom, accelerating into the very thing everyone else was desperate to escape. Current velocity exceeding safety limits, Volkov announced. Safety is relative, Webb replied. Keep those engines burning. They hit the main current flow, and their speed jumped by another 40%. The forces involved were crushing. I could see their shields rippling, fighting to maintain integrity. The hull was flexing, bending in ways that should have resulted in catastrophic failure. First transition point in 5 seconds, Okafor called out. 4, 3. Tanaka fired lateral thrusters, and the ship snapped sideways, slipping from one current to another. The maneuver was so precise, so perfectly timed, that they barely felt the sheer forces. She had threaded between gravitational streams with centimeters to spare. Second transition in 7 seconds, Okafor continued. This one was worse. The gap between currents was smaller, the timing tighter. Tanaka adjusted pitch and yaw simultaneously, corkscrewing the ship through a space that looked too narrow for anything to fit through. They made it. Barely. Their shields scraped against the edge of the distortion field, and I saw their power output drop by 15%. Shields at 42%, Volkov reported. We cannot take another hit like that. We will not have to, Tanaka said. Final transition coming up. This is the big one. The vortex exit point was ahead of them now, a swirling patch of space where the Maelstrom's inward pull briefly reversed. But it was not stationary, It orbited around the central mass, spinning through the chaos, and it only opened for that tiny window of time. Adjusting approach angle, Tanaka said. We need to hit it at exactly the right vector, or we will just bounce off. 10 seconds to window opening, Okafor announced. Speed is good, Volkov added. Angle is good. Shields are holding. 5 seconds. Every being on the Meridian Bloom's bridge was frozen, watching. I was not breathing. I am pretty sure Cortax was not breathing. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, the way it does when you are watching something that will either be miraculous or tragic with no middle ground. 3 seconds. 2. Full burn now, Webb ordered. The Tsunami Rider's engines exploded with light. Every system they had dumped power into propulsion. They shot forward like they had been fired from a railgun, crossing the final distance in a blur of motion. Window opening, Okafor said. Come on, Tanaka whispered. They hit the vortex exit point at exactly, and I mean exactly, the right moment. The outward flow caught them, the gravitational current reversed, and the maelstrom spat them out like it had changed its mind about eating them. The Tsunami Rider tumbled into clear space, spinning end over end, systems smoking and shields down to almost nothing. But they were out. They were alive. For several seconds, nobody on either ship said anything. The silence was profound and heavy and full of the kind of relief that comes from watching someone survive something they absolutely should not have survived. Then Webb's voice came through, slightly breathless, but somehow still maintaining that casual tone. Well, that was bracing. Everyone okay? Hull integrity at 70%. Volkov reported, engines need a full rebuild. Shields need 2 full rebuilds. But we are operational. Data collection was successful, Okafor added. We got everything. Full spectrum analysis, gravitational harmonics, temporal distortion maps. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of spatial anomalies. Yuki? Webb asked. I need a drink, Tanaka said. Or 6 drinks. But yeah, I am good. Webb laughed. Actually laughed. The man had just escaped death by less than a second, had flown through conditions that would have destroyed any other ship, had done something that would be talked about in navigation academies for generations, and he was laughing. Meridian Bloom, thanks for the support. Apologies for the excitement. We will be maintaining a safe distance now while we process our data and patch our ship back together. Cortax found his voice. Captain Webb, that was the most reckless, dangerous, and frankly insane piece of flying I have ever witnessed. Is that a compliment or a complaint, mate? I honestly do not know anymore. The Tsunami Rider limped into a stable orbit near our position, and over the next several hours, we watched them work. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, running repairs, analyzing data, arguing good-naturedly about what they had learned. Webb gave us copies of their sensor readings, and our science team spent the entire night poring through the information with expressions of stunned disbelief. The data was incredible. The humans had collected measurements that should have been impossible to obtain. They had mapped gravitational harmonics at scales we had never achieved. They had documented phenomena that our best theories said could not exist. And they had done it by flying directly into the thing we had spent decades carefully avoiding. The next morning, Cortax invited Webb to a video conference. I sat in because, well, someone needed to document this for the records, and I had a feeling this conversation would be referenced in galactic maritime law updates for cycles to come. Webb appeared on the screen looking remarkably well-rested for someone who should have been traumatized. He had a cup of that horrible coffee in his hand. Captain Cortax. Quillix. Good to see you both. How are things on the Meridian Bloom? Calm, Cortax said dryly. Stable. All the things that I enjoy in my work environment. Captain Webb, I have been reviewing your mission logs and the authorization you received for your research. Something wrong with the paperwork? No, the paperwork is impeccable, which is what concerns me. Someone in the Galactic Scientific Directorate knew what you were planning and approved it anyway. Webb smiled. Well, we were very thorough in our proposal, explained the risks, detailed our safety measures, showed our calculations. They agreed that the potential scientific value outweighed the dangers. Did you mention that your plan involved flying directly into the currents? We may have described it as an aggressive data collection approach. Technical language, you understand, makes things sound more professional. Cortax sighed. Captain Webb, do you understand what is going to happen now? Word of your success is already spreading. Other research teams are going to want to study dangerous phenomena up close. People are going to attempt similar missions. Good, Webb said simply. The galaxy is full of things we do not understand because everyone is too scared to get close enough to study them properly. Yeah, there are risks. Yeah, some missions will fail. But that is how progress works. You push boundaries. You test limits. You figure out what is possible. People will die, Cortax said quietly. People die in safe jobs too, Captain. They die in accidents, equipment failures, random chance. At least this way, they die learning something new, expanding our knowledge, making the next attempt safer. Webb leaned forward. Look, I know this makes you uncomfortable. Your species values caution, preparation, certainty. That is not wrong, but humans, we are wired differently. We look at the unknown and we want to know it. We see danger and we want to understand it, not because we are stupid or suicidal, but because that is how we have always survived. By sailing into storms, I said. Exactly, Quillix. By sailing into storms, and yeah, sometimes the storm wins. Sometimes ships sink and crews are lost. But sometimes you learn that the storm has patterns, rules, weaknesses, and then you teach others, and the next ship does better, and eventually what seemed impossible becomes routine. Cortax was quiet for a long moment. Then, your data on the Maelstrom, the patterns you documented. They suggest the phenomenon is more stable than we thought, that it follows rules we simply did not understand. That is our analysis. Yeah, it is dangerous, absolutely, but it is not random. And if it is not random, it can be navigated, with the right skills and equipment. Webb paused. We will be publishing our findings, along with detailed navigation protocols. Anyone who wants to attempt similar research will have a better starting point than we did. How generous, Cortax said, but there was something almost like approval in his voice. It is what humans do, mate. We break trails so others can follow. Someone has to go first. After the call ended, Cortax and I sat in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. Quillix, make a note in your logs. As of today, the Aquilux sector is no longer classified as completely impassable. Extreme caution is still advised, but under specific conditions with appropriate expertise and equipment, navigation through the outer currents is theoretically possible. Theoretically, I echoed. Humans will make it practically possible within a cycle, I suspect. And then they will teach everyone else how to do it. He shook his head. I do not know if they are the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. Maybe they are both, sir. Maybe. 3 days later, the tsunami rider departed, heading for their next research target. Some kind of plasma fountain near the galactic core that supposedly tore apart anyone who got within a light year of it. Webb sent us a cheerful farewell message and an invitation to join them sometime if we ever wanted to see something really exciting. Cortax declined politely, but I noticed he kept their navigation protocols, and he ordered our pilot to study the techniques Tanika had used. And when the next difficult navigation challenge came up, a tricky passage through an asteroid field that we would normally have gone around, he authorized an approach vector that was, by Vexlerian standards, almost aggressive. We made it through in half the time the safe route would have taken. Humans. They show up, break every rule everyone thought was unbreakable, survive things they should not survive, and somehow make you feel like you are the one who has been doing it wrong the whole time. The worst part, they are usually right. 6 cycles later, the Maelstrom passage is now listed in standard navigation charts. 70 ships have successfully transited through the outer currents using the protocols the tsunami rider established. 3 research stations have been established to study the phenomenon. We understand more about spatial anomalies in 6 cycles than we learned in the previous 600. All because 4 humans looked at the most dangerous thing in 3 sectors and said, yeah, we can totally handle that. I heard recently that Captain Marcus Webb and his crew are planning an expedition to study the inside of a collapsing neutron star. They have a theory that the gravitational time dilation effects could be surfed if you had the right approach angle and enough nerve. I am sure they will be fine. Humans always are. Somehow. They sail into the storm, they ride the wave, they thread the needle that everyone else swears is too small, and then they come back with data and stories and that slightly amused expression that suggests they already knew they could do it, they just had to prove it to everyone else. So here is what I learned from the humans, from Webb and Tanaka and Volkov and Okafor, from that terrifying day when they flew into the Maelstrom and came back out again. The universe is dangerous. It is full of things that will kill you without thought or malice, simply because you are small and fragile, and the cosmos operates on scales that make individual lives meaningless. Every species that reaches the stars learns this truth and develops their own response to it. Most of us choose caution. We map the dangers, mark them on charts, establish safe zones and forbidden regions. We survive by avoiding, by going around, by respecting the things that can destroy us. Humans choose different. They do not avoid danger. They study it. They measure it. They figure out its rules and patterns, and then they sail right through the middle of it, grinning like maniacs, collecting data the whole way. Are they crazy? Absolutely. Are they brilliant? Without question. Will they get us all killed someday with their ridiculous plans and impossible maneuvers? Possibly. But they will also teach us things we never imagined we could know. They will take us places we never thought we could go. They will show us that the boundaries we accepted were just limits of imagination, not limits of reality. The human captain sailed into the Maelstrom, and he brought it back. Not the Maelstrom itself, obviously. That would be absurd even by human standards. But he brought back its secrets, its patterns, its rules. He turned the unknowable into the known. He made the impossible routine. And that, I am starting to understand, is what humans do. They find the storm. They sail into it. They figure it out. And then they teach everyone else how to follow. The galaxy is a different place now that humans are part of it. More dangerous, perhaps. And definitely more chaotic. But also more knowable, more explorable, more full of possibilities. I would not have it any other way. Even if they do still drink that horrible coffee,